sudden, Gillies comes out of there at work on Hospital.
The Clark Gillies that I know is I have incredible amount of respect for him, played against him a lot, and he was always a fierce competitor. And if you're going to worry about him physically, he'll score on you. And so going out, against Trottier, Bossy, and Gillies. Sometimes you got a big tough guy that slows down the other guys, but he could play right with them. Could skate, he'd hit, and like I say, he was big and strong and could skate, and so it's not like he's standing there. If you run into him, you're going to get hurt. He's running into you. So he was fabulous.
What if you had to face a 6'3", 220-pound giant on the ice? Someone who could drop you with a single punch, yet also score 30 goals in a season. That was Clark Gillies. Known by his teammates as Jethro, he carried the quiet smile of a small-town boy from Saskatchewan, until someone touched one of his teammates. Even the most feared enforcers of the Philadelphia Flyers could not stand their ground against him. And in Part 4, the most violent man ever to play for Philadelphia will make a confession about Gillies that nobody saw coming. Stay with us. On December 30th, 1981, the New York Islanders faced the New York Rangers at Madison Square Garden. The rivalry between these two teams had reached a boiling point, and the tension on the ice that night was unlike anything the crowd had seen in years. Ed "Boxcar" Hospodar was one of the Rangers' most physical players, a man known for his brutal style and his willingness to intimidate anyone wearing an opposing jersey. That night, Hospodar pushed too far. He challenged Clark Gillies. The two men dropped their gloves. Hospodar moved in, looking for an angle. He never found one. Gillies threw a single right-hand punch, clean, direct, and devastating. The blow landed flush on Hospodar's face and broke his jaw. Medical staff rushed onto the ice to help him. The fight had lasted only a few seconds. What made the moment truly terrifying was what Gillies did next. He calmly picked up his gloves and skated back into position, as if nothing had happened. Former NHL player Jimmy Mann later said, "He was the most feared fighter this game has ever seen. What he did to Hospodar was known and respected across the entire league." After that night, nobody really wanted to challenge an angry Gillies. Journalist Stan Fischler wrote that the punch broke not only Hospodar's jaw, but the Rangers' will to fight for the rest of that night. Gillies himself once said, "I do not enjoy fighting, but if you force me to protect this team, I will make sure you never want to do it again." Do not go anywhere. Part 4 is where things get truly surprising. If there was one opponent who tested Clark Gillies more than anyone else, it was Terry O'Reilly of the Boston Bruins. Nicknamed Taz for his relentless aggression, O'Reilly was one of the toughest and most respected fighters in the league. In the 1980 playoffs, the Islanders needed to go through Boston to reach the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time in franchise history. O'Reilly made it his mission to disrupt the Islanders' key players. Gillies made it his mission to stop him. The two men fought 4 times across that single playoff series, each confrontation more physical than the last. O'Reilly left the ice after every game with visible damage on his face. But what separated Gillies from every other enforcer in that series was what he did between the fights. In Game 1, after one of the most punishing exchanges of the series, Gillies scored the overtime goal that gave the Islanders the win. He was not just a protector. He was a leader who delivered when it mattered most. Terry O'Reilly himself acknowledged it years later. "I did not want to fight him, and I doubt he enjoyed hitting me either. But Clark was the guy who made people like me stop. He led with both skill and strength." Stan Fischler put it more directly. O'Reilly looked like he had kissed a freight train after 5 rounds with Gillies. That was how Clark established order for the Islanders. In the mid-1970s, the Philadelphia Flyers ruled the NHL through fear. Their style of play was built on intimidation, and at the center of it all was Dave the Hammer Schultz, the most penalized player in the history of the league, a man whose reputation alone was enough to unsettle entire rosters before a game even began. The Islanders, at that time, were widely considered a soft team. That perception was about to change forever. On May 8, 1975, in Game 5 of the playoff semifinals, Flyers head coach Fred Shero sent Schultz onto the ice with one purpose: to send a message to the young New York Islanders. The target was a rookie named Clark Gillies. Schultz expected an easy lesson. What he got was something else entirely. Gillies threw 3 consecutive punches, the first landing directly on Schultz's nose. The man they called the Hammer, the most feared fighter in professional hockey, staggered and went down. This was not just a fight, it was a transfer of power. The era of mindless intimidation had met its match in a player who combined raw physical dominance with genuine hockey ability. Years later, Schultz made a confession that stunned many who heard it. Gillies was big and incredibly strong. He is the only guy who ever made me feel truly small on the ice. I have nothing but the highest respect for those hands. And then came the words that no one expected from Dave Schultz. There are big players who cannot play hockey, and skilled players who are afraid of contact. Clark Gillies was the only one who had both at the highest level. That is why he is in the Hall of Fame, and guys like me are not. Jack Chevalier of the Philadelphia Bulletin wrote at the time, "That was the ultimate humiliation. Gillies did not just win a fight, he destroyed the symbol of power of the Flyers." What do you think about Clark Gillies so far? Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And do not go anywhere. The next stories are ones you will not want to miss. Al Secord was one of the toughest players in the NHL, a man who had never backed down from anyone. When he decided to step in and confront Clark Gillies on behalf of his teammates, he believed he was ready. Secord threw the first punch while still wearing his gloves. Then Gillies began to remove his. What happened in that moment changed everything. As Gillies slowly pulled off his gloves and revealed his enormous fists, Secord felt something he had rarely experienced on the ice. He later admitted that a wave of fear ran straight through him at the sight of those hands. Calm, deliberate, and impossibly large. 2 punches. That was all it took. Secord recalled it plainly. When he took his gloves off and I saw his fists, I genuinely panicked. His fists were unbelievably big. All I could see were those hands, and then there was nothing but darkness. Larry Playfair, who witnessed Gillies prepare for fights on multiple occasions, said, "Gillies looked truly scary when he was getting ready to go. It was a look that made you want to turn around and leave immediately." Mike Bossy was one of the greatest goal scorers the NHL has ever seen. But Bossy was not a fighter. He was the kind of player that physical opponents targeted specifically because they knew he would not retaliate. Jerry Korab of the Buffalo Sabres was one of them. Nicknamed King Kong for his imposing size, Korab had made a habit of bullying Bossy whenever the opportunity arose. One day, Bossy had enough. He told Gillies he was going to drive his elbow into Korab's face the next time it happened. He only asked one thing: "When I land, I want to see you standing right there." Gillies smiled and nodded. When the moment came and Korab turned to retaliate, he found himself face to face with Clark Gillies, motionless, expressionless, and immovable. Korab said nothing. He pulled back and skated away. Not a single punch was thrown. Mike Bossy later said, "With Clark behind me, I felt like I could play anywhere, against anyone, without fear." Brian Trottier reflected on it years later. "Clark was our big brother. He did not need to say a word. His presence alone was enough to make sure nobody dared touch Mike or me." Clark Gillies played 958 NHL games, scored 319 goals, and finished his career with a plus-minus rating of plus 245. He won 4 consecutive Stanley Cup championships with the New York Islanders from 1980 to 1983 and was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2002. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The man who terrified an entire league never fought out of anger. He fought out of loyalty. Off the ice, he dedicated years of his life to the Clark Gillies Foundation, helping thousands of children in need. The most feared player in the room turned out to be its most generous soul. Which NHL legend do you think deserves to be featured next? Leave a comment and let us know. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stories like this one. Thank you for watching.